Just when I think I write off a particular beer style for good, a local Oktoberfest serves up a version that creates a new obsession for me, and that obsession starts now. Welcome to Big Monster Brewing. I am Matt. This is the Anvil Foundry Brewing Edition. And before we start, let me quick say that if you like what you see, please consider subscribing, liking the video, comment with any questions, and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on anything, especially on the small batch Anvil Foundry Brewing. I think I'm one of a handful of channels that features the small version of the Anvil Foundry, and that's pretty much all I do my brewing on in one way or another, as you'll see as this series continues. Today I am attempting my latest obsession style, and that is a Dunkles Weissbier. At least that's what the BJCP style guideline calls it. It is category 10B. They call it Dunkles Weissbier. Another way to describe it is a darker, more malt-forward version of a Hefeweizen. At least that's how I'm interpreting it, and that is what I'm trying to make today. Wheat beers, German wheat beers, Hefeweizens, anything that kind of incorporates that flavor, I've kind of, I don't want to say outgrew or kind of put aside, maybe is a better way to say it. I haven't really given it much thought and concentration because it's not my favorite style. It's not a bad style, it's just not my favorite. That is until a local Oktoberfest here for a local brewery served one up as one of their 3 Oktoberfest beers, and something about this one just triggered a new obsession. So this is a style that I'm probably going to be working on quite a bit over the next couple of years to dial into what I would like to see out of it. And that new obsession all starts with the recipe, and this recipe is kind of fun to play with, especially with the starting one in this episode and in this brew day. And that recipe all starts with a big wheat base. I want this to be a true German Weissbier, so I need at least 50% wheat malt, and I have that with 3.6 pounds of white wheat malt. And that rounds that out to 55.8% of this grist, so I'm well over that 50% mark I was aiming for. To round out that base and give it a little malty, bready character, I'm putting in 2 pounds, 3.2 ounces of Munich malt. For the specialty malts, this is where things will probably change the most in the future and where the most fun comes into making a grist for a beer like this. For this one, we have got 3 ounces of 50-60L British Crystal Malt, 2 ounces of Belgian Special B Malt, 2 ounces of Carafa 2, and just a little bit of maltose character from 0.5 ounce of Melanoidin malt. There is one more thing I need to add to this grist, and that is due to the fact that I am using over 50% of wheat malt in this. Wheat malt is a huskless malt, as opposed to, say, the Munich malt, which is we're going to be putting in both the husks and the starches and everything that comes out of milling it. Since we have no husk coming from the wheat and it's over half our grist, I am going to add rice hulls. Rice hulls should help prevent a stuck sparge. It'll compensate for those missing husks from the white wheat malt, and it won't add any flavor or aroma or ABV to the beer. It's a very innocuous addition. Hopefully it'll make the brew day go better. I'm not really measuring anything out. I'm just kind of eyeballing it, not being real scientific here, just adding a good amount of rice hulls. Now on to the brew. I am making a 2.5 gallon batch on the 6.5 gallon Anvil Foundry, starting off with 3.5 gallons of water that I'm bringing up to my strike temperature of 153 degrees. I start recirculating the water, and since this is RO water, I add some brewing salts. I'm trying to match a malt-forward brown ale, kind of a general description, a general profile, I should say, that I got out of Beersmith 3. And while that heats up, I mill the grains, everything except the rice hulls. When the strike water is up to temperature, I add the rice hulls and the milled grains in phases. First, a little bit of the rice hulls, then some of the grains to stir it up, then a little more of the grains, then top it off with the rest of the rice hulls. There's no reason I did that particular sequence. That's just how it worked out for this video. Once the mash is going, I set the power to 80% on the heating coils, and I get 1 gallon of sparge water heated up. I set a timer for the first phase of this mash at 50 minutes, and it doesn't take long for the recirculation to show some amazing color on this beer. About every 15 minutes, I also give the mash a good stir. While the mash continues, I get the boil additions ready, and this one is a pretty simple addition. It is 1 bittering charge of a classic noble German hop with 0.62 ounces of Hallertauer at 60 minutes. And that is it for the hops, but we still have my usual boil additions of yeast nutrients at 10 minutes and just a little whirlflock at 2 minutes. After that 50-minute mash at 153 degrees Fahrenheit, I raise the temperature to 168 degrees for a 10-minute mash out. And once that's done, I lift the malt pipe out of the foundry and sparge with that 1 gallon of water that I have heated up to 170 degrees. As that last bit of sweet wort is draining into the Anvil foundry, I set it to boil mode and wait for those very simple but important boil additions to come. For the yeast, I went with a dry yeast on this brew because I couldn't get any of the liquid yeast strains that I wanted to try, and I also really wanted to get this started. So I went with the Safale WB06 for this first try, and we'll work from there. At the end of that 60-minute boil, I kill the power and begin to chill the wort. I chill the wort down to my target, actually a little below at 64 degrees, and then I transfer the wort into the fermenter. And then I pitch this yeast, and I don't rehydrate it because on the packet for this strain specifically, it said not to rehydrate it. So after pitching, I did give it a little shake to make sure it was incorporated well into the wort. And knowing that this yeast could potentially take off, I start the fermentation with a blow-off tube this time. After about 2 weeks of fermenting and 48 hours of cold crashing, I transfer the wort to a keg, carbonate it with the Blickman Quick Carb, and now I'm ready to taste what I think is going to be the first of quite a few versions of this beer. It is tasting time, and let's take a quick look at this. I don't think the camera is going to do the color justice. That's what kind of made me launch my obsession and kind of fall in love with this beer, is love at first sight. The color is such a rich brown mahogany. There's almost seems like there's a purple tint to it, but there's not, which just really intrigues me. In fact, I took some footage of this under a light to get a better idea of the color because I know the camera's not going to pick it up. The head on this is so like froth. It looks almost like some whipped cream was put on top of it. In fact, what it looks like, this is going to be a really strange comparison and a really specific one that you have to have seen. If you've ever been to Universal Studios, either in Hollywood or Orlando, maybe the other ones too overseas, I'm not sure, I've never been there, but if you get a butter beer at one of the Harry Potter worlds, whatever they're called, I'm not a big Harry Potter fan, but I do like their butter beer, they put a buttercream on top of this. It looks like the buttercream they put on top of butterbeer. It's just so moussey and thick and rich looking. But let's get to the important stuff of it, the aroma, the taste, and everything else. The appearance is gorgeous. I think I've made that clear. Right off the nose, which I could actually smell pouring the beer, there is that distinct German wheat Hefeweizen family phenolics. The clove more than a banana, a little bit of sweet banana, almost candy banana, but the cloves just really come out. There is a hint of the specialty malts. It's probably the Belgian bee, or the Belgian special bee punching through everything, because that's a pretty strong malt. Just a touch of breadiness, a little bit of biscuit. That's it. Not much. The hops are nowhere to be found in the aroma. It's mainly taken over by the yeast. So I'd say it's like 90 yeast, 10 a little bit of everything else, maybe even like a higher percentage. Let's go on to the taste. Initial taste matches very much of the aromas. I get the clove, a little more banana on here. The malts are actually, wow, on the aftertaste are really coming out. Let me take another taste before I talk about another, what do I want to say? Taste before I take a taste? Sip before I take a taste? Let me try it again. I'm getting a lot more of the base malt on that the second time around. The specialties are supporting that. I definitely get the Belgian bee. I get some sweet. It's not quite the typical malt sweet. That's probably coming from the British caramel, but now I'm kind of getting a nice combination of malt and the yeast, the phenolics. Bananas, I should say, or thinking I should recognize it. I think maybe my mind is drawing it out more than my taste is, if that makes sense. But I think it is a little bit there. But it's definitely more clove, more of a bready maltiness, and that special B just really kind of being the bridge between the two. I'm going to taste it again and see if I get any more out of that. It's more the same that I just described. Not getting anything new, but it's getting very comfortable to drink. I like the start of this. I like the start of this a lot. There's definitely some things I want to improve. I'm not sure exactly what. I want to play with yeast strains, and I might tone down the Belgian B a little bit, but I gotta find a way to match that color. I wish I can't see what the camera's seeing, but I know it's not seeing what I'm seeing. It's just such a beautiful color. I love that color about this beer. I mean, there's I guess was it chefs say you eat with your eyes? I guess you can drink with your eyes too, because I can't stop looking at it. I did pause a little bit here to kind of let this warm up, because I think I'm going to get a little more character out of it as it warms up. I probably should have poured a smaller sample like I did for the last video. I'm going to try it with just this glass and give it one more sip to see if the taste is kind of what it's doing as it warms up. If anything, all the distinct characters are just stronger now. And I mean that in a good way. Clove's a little stronger. The malt base is a little stronger. That special B, that kind of raisiny dark currant stuff is a little stronger. It's just bringing more of it out as it warms up. It's quite pleasant. And I'm looking forward to see what we do next with this. There was one thing I neglected to tell. As I was warming up, I reviewed my notes. There was one story I neglected to tell about this beer, and that's the title. The thing that basically opened the show. It's called I Hate Musicals. That comes from, I'll try to make this as short as possible. When I got this beer at that Oktoberfest, they were calling it a Dunkles Weiss. So when I tasted that and decided I really want to try to make one, I'm looking up Dunkles Weiss all over the internet for different recipes and whatnot. First thing I see is BJCP calls it a Dunkles Weissbier. Then the name, it's got like 17 different names. Dark, Hefeweizen, Dark Weiss, Dunkel Weiss, Weiss Dunkel, every combination and then some. But Dunkel Weiss was stuck in my head from the very beginning, and I'd find myself humming those words to the tune of Edelweiss from The Sound of Music. That's the only part of that song I know, because it reminds me that I dislike musicals. There are some exceptions. I mean, Book of Mormon was enjoyable. Xanadu was enjoyable on a level that you're not supposed to enjoy it, because that's another story altogether. I don't even know if I want to tell that story. Let's just say the version we saw was so bad it was good. And there's probably some other ones there as well, but I just am not a fan of musicals, and I thought, since I could not stop humming Edelweiss to the tune, or humming Dunkelweiss to the tune of Edelweiss, I'll call this I Hate Musicals as an homage to that. Man, that story did not come out short the way I wanted it to. Anyway, great start. Not perfect. I did bottle 4 of these and sent them to 3 of these. It doesn't matter. I bottled some for a competition. I forget how many bottles I needed, what it comes down to. So I'm looking forward to what some experienced palates think of it. Maybe take some of those suggestions into my next version. And I'm going to try this again, because now this is my obsession. It was alt beer for a while. I've done really well with alt beer this season. I think I got it where I like it. I got it that happy medium where it's doing well in competition and I really like to drink it. I think I got that recipe locked in. So next it's going to be the Dunkles Weiss, Dunkles Weiss, whatever name you want to give it. I'll go with the Dunkles Weissbier for the BJCP. And the irony just hits me that it's like the next shade up an SRM from alt beer. So I guess I have an SRM preference. Anyway, that's it for this video. I'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new one. Got one that me and my wife put together that we'll be talking about. I don't know if she'll be on. I'd like to have her on for the tasting, because it's interesting that she wanted to make this beer, because it's not in her palate range of things she likes. I'd like to see what she'd say about it on camera. We'll see. No promises that she'll be on, but I'll be back. And before I go, I want to say, of course, thank you for watching, and I will see you in that next episode.